My God, is that a rib? Oh, these are gonna be great. You have no idea how good these are gonna taste. I'm telling you right now. Today, we are cooking the Dino rib. This beautiful cut of meat is going to be an awesome challenge for our GE indoor smoker. It's the day of the big game, and we're hoping to go big with the biggest rib you can have. It should be a pretty easy preparation today. We're simply going to slather the meat in mustard, cover it in our favorite rub, and then stick it in the indoor smoker, which I'm guessing is probably going to run between 7 and 8 hours. So let's get started. First thing, as usual, I got a great cut of meat from Porter Road. This is their Dino ribs. A lot of times you have to go to a butcher to ask for these. They don't necessarily have these sitting available. So make sure you go to a good butcher if you're looking for something like this. What we'll get out is this beautiful cut of meat. What you can see here is this great flat bone here. You'll see here with this big layer of meat right here, and then this layer of fat with this extra hunk of meat on the top. So what I like to do typically is try to trim some of this fat down, especially in this larger cap area here. So what we're going to do is simply start trying to carve that away using a really sharp knife. And we're just going to try to make sure we're not skimming any of the actual meat. One trick when you're working with meats like this, if you keep these as cold as possible, it makes trimming the fat significantly easier. If you let it get up to room temperature, you'll find that the fat's just kind of mushy and meaty. Let's see, so this has got a nice cap, so I'm going to try to trim this big piece off here. Yeah, that's looking much better. Unlike a brisket where you're keeping that big layer of fat on the top and trying to trim it down just a little, it's okay to try to trim this close because we're really trying to make sure that this fat cap here doesn't hinder the rest of the process of cooking the meat. But we do want to make sure that we're still imparting some of that great flavor on it. But I don't want to leave too much because it will tend to make the smoke go longer. By the way, you can keep this fat. It's great to render down and use it as like a tallow. So always keep it, set it aside. You can melt it, store it, and use it later. The prep work that you're doing here really will pay off in the cooking time of this. So I strongly recommend you try to trim this down to a decent level that you're comfortable with. You can see the fat cap's still pretty thick here, so I am going to continue to try to trim that down just a bit more without trying to cut into the meat. Okay, I think we've done a pretty good job, so I'm going to set that aside now. This beef fat we're going to store. The next step for prep is using some sort of liquid. People will use hot sauce, they'll use mustard, olive oil. I typically use whatever I can find. In this case, since we're going with a very traditional spice rub, we're just going to use our mustard today. So what you want to do is put a nice layer of mustard on here. The reason that you use the mustard is it helps you to have the rub stick to the actual meat. If you don't do it, sometimes when you put your rub on, it just kind of tends to fall off. So people have always used a binding agent like a mustard or something. Now I put a little on the back here, and I'll put just a little bit of the spice on here, but the reality of it is that's not going to affect the flavor of the meat whatsoever. I also like to make sure this little section that I cut the lap was up has plenty of mustard on it as well, because I'm going to put a lot of spice in there and then cover that back up. So again, don't be too worried about this. Is not going to put much flavor additive into the ribs themselves. It's just more of a bonding agent. The next step we want to do is add a heavy coat of our rub. In this case, I'm trying Terry Black's barbecue rub. I had these cuts at Terry Black's and it was one of the best bite of food I've ever had, so I'm interested in trying it at home. Typically I would use my own rub or even just very simply salt and good butcher pepper. But it's a Super Bowl, so I want to try something new, so let's give this a shot. Hopefully this turns out well. And that's a good sound, as I hear that our GE indoor smoker is letting me know it is now ready to roll. So as you notice, I pull that little flap up. I'm gonna put some of our spice in here as well. Get a good rub on this. And again, anytime you're dealing with spices, you're gonna wanna make sure you get them on and that you pat them in and that you cover all of your meat up. The last thing you want is some poor soul to get a bite of one of these incredible ribs that wasn't treated fairly like the rest of the meat. So make sure you get this really well done. Again, I'll tell you, I will put a little of the seasoning on the bottom, but I try not to do it too heavy because I hate wasting my seasoning that much on this type of rib because it's really not gonna impart any flavor on the actual meat. But if somebody were to happen to be venturesome and try to go down here, and you can see I just do a light spread on here just to make sure it's got some flavor. And then I think it's looking pretty good. I am gonna hit it with another coat here on the top since this is gonna be our area that's gonna impart the most flavor. I'm gonna make sure we have a very nice heavy coat on this just because I really love their rub and wanna do these right. So the challenge we're gonna be facing today is, this is the size of the rack, and this is the size of the ribs. And you can see they just barely fit. So I think we're gonna be pushing the size of the GE indoor smoker to its absolute max by doing this today, but I think it's gonna turn out great. I hope it is. So it's now gonna go into our oven that's been preheating at 250 degrees. I have the smoke level set on 5. And I'm going to use a probe eventually, but to start this for the first 3 or 4 hours, I'm just going to let it go at 250 degrees, and then I'll come back, make sure I get a probe into it, and really start to see how the temperature is turning out. Another trick is when you're using this in the GE smoker, the hotter part of the smoking oven is in the rear. So whenever you're cooking larger chunks of meat, make sure you get your thickest part of the meat towards the rear of the unit. Okay, it's in. It's preheated. Let's start. I can hear our pellets being fed into the auger, and it sounds like our smoking process is about to begin. We'll come back and check on the ribs here in probably 3 or 4 hours. We're going to need to clear the smoke out, put the probe in, and then actually probably increase the temperature as we're going to begin to start to render the fat. These are going to be fabulous. I can't wait till we get a chance to see the progress they're making. We've had the Dino ribs in the smoker now for about 4 hours. I've rotated them a couple times. I sprayed them with a mixture of half apple cider vinegar, half water, spritzed them to try to help keep the crust soft. Now what I'm gonna do is pull them out. They've reached an internal temp of about 175. I'm gonna pull them out, slather them in our beef tallow, wrap them up in paper, and then stick them back in the oven to try to bring them up to a final temperature of about 195 or so, somewhere in that neighborhood. So let's pull them out of the GE now and see how they're looking. All righty. Those are looking spectacular. Just this gigantic hunk of meat here. So let me get these out of the way. Pull these here. And the key here is when you're using this beef tallow, is to get it spread over all of your meat, wrapped tightly, and then sealed up, because what we're now trying to do is impact more flavor and putting more of our moisture back into this meat. So now as we try to render the rest of the fat in this, as we're rendering it, we want to add more fat to help it out. You can do this in a lot of ways. I'm old-fashioned. I just like to use my hand because that way I can control the delivery of this and make sure that I'm getting it exactly as I want it, where I want it. And you can be generous with it. Again, this is just beef fat. It's incredible. I buy this at online actually, and I find that since I've added this to my game, I've really upgraded the quality of my meats and how they come out now. You can see this is just smelling wonderful, and you can just start to see the tallow dropping all around. Make sure I get it nice and luscious here everywhere. And I feel I've got a good amount of that on there. And then what I'm going to try to do is get these in. Now remember, this right now is the top. So I want to remember that, because when I go to put this in, I want to make sure I'm wrapping this in tightly. So now I've got that in. Don't lose any of that beautiful tallow. Alrighty, so now I've got that really well wrapped up. I'm just going to stick it now back into the smoker, and then we'll call it a day. We're going to let this go for about, I don't know, we'll probably another hour and a half, I'm guessing, until we get it up to about 190 degrees of internal temp. Then we'll get it out and we're going to let it rest. And hopefully I can let it rest for a couple hours before we go to serve it before the Super Bowl. For the sake of transparency, the smoker's really full here right now, and I'm going to go put this on the Traeger upstairs just at about 200 degrees, 225 degrees, and I'll do that to keep this going until I reach that 190. Hey, we just pulled the Dino ribs out of the smoker, so let's give them a cut and see how they turned out. Man, these are going to be amazing, actually. My God, is that a rib? Oh, these are going to be great. You have no idea how good these are going to taste. I'm telling you right now. I've made a lot of things in my life. These are going to be amazing. This isn't for the video. I'm just telling you real life. These are, if you've never had one of these ribs before, it's like a brisket sitting on top. Look at that. Look at that juice, babe. Can you get in? Look at that juice. Oh my God, these are gonna be so good. Ho, ho, ho. We got a winner here. Alrighty. This is the good camera. This is the one where you really get the money shot, because these are like, oh my God, I want this so bad. I know, money shot. What do you think about that, yeah, I made these. Look at that. Look at that.
Oh my God, it's beautiful.